Hey everyone, today I just wanted to talk a bit about why I think that the 3.15 changes concerning all the nerfs are actually GGG taking the game in the wrong direction overall. I know a lot of people are going to be disagreeing with this video, so I just want to preface it by saying that my goal here is not to tell anyone that they are enjoying the game wrong or that their opinions are wrong, and I do want to point out that I think GGG are a really great company. I think PoE is a really great game, and regardless of what my opinions in this video are, I'm still going to have a lot of fun in the upcoming patch. So far, GGG have told us that they feel players are power creeped a little too far for what they feel is comfortable, and also that there is a little too much of a disparity between the stronger and the weaker skill and support gems, and 3.15 is the first step in trying to rein in the power creep and decrease that disparity for the gems. And so this is just going to be a short video as to why I think that whilst the intentions might be good, I think the methods and the way they are going to try and achieve this is not exactly the right way to be going about it. We'll address these issues separately, starting with the first one, and that is that they feel players are too power creeped, or they're beating certain content a little too fast or a little too easily. And we'll just use a simple example, and then I'll plot down some solutions to show you exactly how I feel about this and what I would think a better approach is. So the example we're using here is that a boss has 10,000 life, player 1 deals 100 damage per second, meaning it's going to take them 100 seconds to defeat the boss, and then player 2 deals 200 damage per second, taking 50 seconds to defeat the boss. This is kind of an accurate representation of how the player base works at the moment. There are many players such as myself who can insta-phase or insta-kill a lot of the endgame bosses, whereas other parts of the player base completely struggle. Many are unable to kill these bosses, and the ones that do take several minutes. You know, sometimes we see videos of serious fights taking upwards of 15 minutes to complete. And so this is basically a representation of where the player base as a whole is at. I know it's a very simplified version, but we'll just work with it since it demonstrates what I'm trying to say fairly easily. So the first solution we have is that GGG could nerf player 2's ability by 50%, causing both players to now take 100 seconds to defeat the boss, which would be more in line with what they want. Because obviously in this example, GGG feels that player 2 is a little too strong and is defeating the content too easily. Now the outcome here is that player 1 doesn't really care about this change. Player 1 is still taking 100 seconds to defeat the boss, and it doesn't really affect them, the fact that other people are getting nerfed. They may be ever so slightly happy seeing other players being brought more in line with them, as they don't feel they're so behind, but overall they probably won't care. On the other hand, player 2 feels unhappy as they're now investing twice as much time to do the content they're already doing. They feel like they are a lot weaker, and they're not being rewarded anymore for now the extra effort they're going to have to be putting into the game. This doesn't mean that player 2 feels the decision is unfair or anything, right? When you get nerfed because you're playing something that's strong, you understand that you were playing something that needed to be toned down eventually. So it's not like you're sitting around there saying, it's very unfair, my skill was nerfed. It's more that you're feeling unhappy because now you know in the future you're going to have to work harder to achieve something that at the moment you're, achieving with X amount of effort, right? And in the future you're gonna have to put in 2x amount of effort. The second solution is to increase the boss HP to 20,000 from 10,000, causing both players to take twice as long to defeat the boss. So in this example, player 1 feels unhappy as they're now investing twice as much time to do the content they're already doing, so that it was previously taking them 100 seconds to do it, and it's now taking them 200 seconds to kill this boss. This is a really long time, and these players are going to absolutely hate this. In fact, with the way PoE works, because it takes 200 seconds, that's a lot of time to make mistakes and to die to fatal mechanics. Player 1 may just be unable to kill the boss anymore. If you look at a Cirrus fight, whilst the most skilled players can stay in combat with Cirrus virtually forever, an unskilled player only has a limited amount of time in which they get to fight Cirrus, because sooner or later they're going to screw up and die to a die beam or a coin beam or some other mechanic, right? So by taking twice as long to kill the boss, they may be unable to kill the boss. Player 2 also feels unhappy because from 50 seconds, they're now taking 100 seconds, kind of like in solution number 1. So the net result of this solution is that both players feel unhappy overall with this change. Both solutions solve the problem where GGG felt that players were beating the content too easily, but in both cases you either had one player feeling neutral and one player feeling negative, or you had both players feeling negative. Then we come to solution 3, and that is to create a new boss with 20,000 life, causing player 2 to take 100 seconds to defeat the boss. So in this example, player 1 now has something new to eventually work towards, feeling either positive or neutral about this. You could liken this to when Uber Elder was released. There are a lot of people who already couldn't kill Shaper, for example, and then Uber Elder came out, and they didn't exactly hate this. They already were aware they were unable to do the hardest content in the game, and then GGG added a new level of difficulty, and that was just like something that was like for them, cool. This is something I can keep working towards. You know, I'm close to being able to beat Shaper, and when I do finally beat Shaper, I will then have something to continue working towards. And this is a cool new fight. I can watch other people do it in the meantime. It's something to aspire to. Player 2, on the other hand, now has a whole new goal. They're going to take 100 seconds to kill this new boss, the new Uber boss, Uber Elder, whatever you want to call it, right? Which is more in line with the amount of time and the sort of relative level of difficulty that GGG want players to be engaging in for the hardest level of their content. And player 2 feels fairly satisfied because they're now clearly differentiated from player 1 in terms of their skill level. They can basically say, I could kill this boss that player 1 can't, right? Which is a really good feeling, and I know personally that, you know, being one of the first people in my group of friends to be able to kill Maven, and then to be able to kill Maven on Awakening 9, for example, with the higher health, this was a big deal for me because I got to brag to my friends and say, you know, I beat this boss first, you guys can't beat this boss, I can beat this boss. That means, you know, I'm the best player in our group of friends, right? So this is kind of the solution that I would like to see GGG pursue, where rather than raising the skill floor, they're raising the skill ceiling by adding newer levels of difficulty. That doesn't mean we need the Diablo approach of 120 greater rift levels, but if you look at maps have had 16 tiers that has lasted almost a decade. I think if hypothetically you created Uber maps where Uber tier 1 was the equivalent of tier 17, then that would give you, say, another decade worth of content, especially since power creep is now on the radar for GGG. You could make the 16 extra tiers last 20 years, for example, right? We don't need to, you know, 10 years from now be looking at tier 679 maps, right? We could simply be looking at just a second set of maps with a higher level of difficulty, and I think that would last us plenty of time and would give plenty of room for the top players to work towards even harder content, and the lower players still have stuff to aspire to, not thinking that, oh, well, now once I get to tier 16, it's over, I've done it, right? I think this is... all of these three solutions solved the problem that GGG felt players were beating the content too easily, but only one of these solutions had a net neutral or positive outcome for all the players involved, and that was solution 3, where we created a new level of difficulty, which was something for player 1 to aspire to, and something that player 2 could now do and feel differentiated from the rest of the player base with. So the second problem we're going to look at is the disparity between ability damage being too large, and this is a simple one, but it has a similar outcome, right? So we're going to use the exact same example. A boss has 10,000 life, player 1 deals 100 damage per second, player 2 deals 200 damage per second. It takes them 150 seconds respectively to kill that boss. Now, solution number 1 is we could simply nerf player 2's ability by 50%, causing both players now to take 100 seconds to defeat the boss. In this instance, we don't really care how long it takes the players to defeat the boss. We only care that it takes them a similar amount of time. Whether that's 100 seconds, 50 seconds, 1,000 seconds, it doesn't matter. We just want both players to be dealing roughly the same amount of damage. Now, with this solution, player 1 doesn't really care. They may feel, you know, again, a little bit better that the OP players have now been brought in line and are a little closer to them. They may feel a little better that the skill gap, that the gap between performance has been closed a little, but overall, it's mostly a neutral outcome. Player 2, on the other hand, it's feeling unhappy because, such as with the first example, or the first problem rather, they're now investing twice as much time to do content they're already doing. They feel, you know, a lot weaker. They don't want to be putting in extra effort or twice as much effort for the same amount of reward. You know, that just feels bad in any instance, even if it's a fair nerf, right? And then we move on to solution 2, which is we could buff player 1's ability by 100%, causing both players to now take 50 seconds to defeat the boss, right? So again, in this example, we don't really care that it takes 50 seconds to defeat the boss. That may be a little too quick, and you can go back to problem 1 and use the solution number 3 from problem 1 to solve this if you feel like that's too fast. But the outcomes here is that player 1 feels really good about this change because the ability he enjoys is now appropriately strong. He enjoys this ability, and now he feels like the developers are paying attention to him and know that the ability he's using is undertuned and it needs some love, and he really enjoys it, and it's now just stronger out of nowhere. It's a really great feeling. It doesn't matter what game you're playing, whether you're playing PoE or League of Legends, that the thing you love doing that you know is suboptimal suddenly gets buffed and suddenly is good all of a sudden. You know, like, it's a really great feeling. You just become more powerful out of nowhere, and you've had all this practice on this thing that is sort of, you know, been unpopular, so you're ahead of the rest of the player base on this. You're ahead of the curve, you already know how it works, how to be good with it, that sort of thing. It's a great feeling, it really is. On the other hand, player 2 doesn't really care about this change. Their ability wasn't affected, it's still taking them the same amount of time to kill the boss, so they may feel the tiniest bit unhappy about the fact that the gap between them and player 1 has decreased a little, but overall, they're still doing the same content in the same amount of time for the same reward, so their gameplay loop is largely unaffected, so they don't care. And in this outcome, you have a net neutral and a net positive, right? So solution 2 in this case is clearly the better way to approach this. So how this ties into 3.15? Well, I think the Gem and the Flask nerfs are going to be making everyone weaker, including the people who are already struggling at the game. This is going to be a real shame because there are a lot of people who currently enjoy PoE that are going to be turned off by these changes and will likely stop playing. And there are a lot of people who are probably going to enjoy PoE if they were willing to give it a chance, but they're going to be, turned off when they find Act 1 is obscenely difficult. I know a lot of people like to gatekeep and just say, well, maybe PoE isn't the game for them, but I can at least attest to this personally, where even though I've invested thousands of dollars and thousands of hours into PoE, I tried it 3 to 4 times before I finally stuck with it, and each time that I tried the game previously, I quit before the end of Act 1 because I felt that Act 1 was sending me the wrong messages about what the game was about and about the way the difficulty was designed. Most people expect the difficulty in a game to ramp up from 1 to 10 over the course of the game. When your game starts at a 7, it sort of gives me the impression that your game is designed to kind of be annoyingly difficult for the sake of being difficult. The game did not do a good job of telling me the fact that I would have a great time playing it. PoE is an insanely, great game at providing you with challenges and then rewarding you for overcoming these challenges. I think it's one of the best games on the entire market at doing this. However, when you do Act 1, you don't get this impression. And I think the changes that are coming with the Gem and the Flask nerfs, and even the Act 1 changes, are going to only exacerbate this problem rather than alleviate it. PoE is already too hard for 90 to 95% of the player base. I made that number up, I pulled it out of thin air, but if you look at the Steam achievements, there's some backing to it. It's not exact, but there's definitely the idea that the vast majority of the player base can't make it through the campaign, and then the vast majority of those people that do make it through the campaign can't make it all the way through the endgame and beat the endgame content. I would estimate that probably less than 1% of people that make it to maps end up going on to kill a feed, and that is just based off the amount of people I interact with in my Discord, on my stream, etc., where there are a lot of people who are only barely able to kill Cirrus, and a lot of those people, basically say, well, the feed is not content for me, right? And the people that can kill Cirrus is still a minority amongst the people who are even in the end game. So it's already too hard for most of the player base. People like myself, it's way too easy, but I don't, and that leads into my next point, where higher levels of difficulty for the top 5% would have a net positive outcome. When you introduce higher levels of difficulty, people such as myself have a lot of new content to play through. It's really good for making content, making guides, stuff like that. But it doesn't really affect the people that can't do the content. They don't exactly feel like they're missing out any more than they're already missing out on the content they can't do. So it's not really a problem as far as they're concerned. It's a much better overall outcome to just introduce higher levels of difficulty that keep people such as myself challenged, as opposed to ruining the game for the bottom, say, 20% of players who just at that point give up and say, well, this game is now too hard for me, I don't want to play it anymore. I'm going to go play a game that, seems to treat me like a human being rather than some, godlike machine with insane reflexes. Final point, difficult content should feel adequately rewarding, and there's a reason why Uber at Siri and 100% daily maps aren't popular anymore. Once upon a time, across various patches, this content was very rewarding, and it matched the level of difficulty. In Ultimatum League, I didn't know very many people that farmed Uber at Siri. Some people did it just to sort of test out the new rewards and quickly realized the new rewards did not make it worth doing. And the same for 100% daily maps. With the nerf that came in this league, a lot of people decided they're no longer worth doing, they're not profitable. People don't want to engage in challenges just for the sake of engaging in challenges. They want to be engaged. They want to engage in the challenges, but then feel adequately rewarded. Using an example that isn't PoE, you can look at World of Warcraft. In the Shadowlands expansion, Blizzard made Mythic Dungeons much harder, and they didn't make the content any more rewarding. In fact, they actually made the content less rewarding by nerfing the amount of loot that drops at the end of the dungeon, and this led to the total depletion of the M+ community. You can look at any site that tracks the amount of Mythic Plus keys being run, but you can even tell if you're trying to make certain groups at higher levels once upon a time, making a high-level key group used to take a matter of 5 minutes. You would get dozens upon dozens of applicants with a high enough IO score to join your group, basically. And if you started looking even in at the end of the Shadowlands launch patch, you know, right before, I think it was 9.1 launched, not even right before, but even months before 9.1 launched, there was hardly anyone. We would often be waiting 2 to 3 hours for a single group to form, and all the statistics from external sites showed that the M+ community had completely dwindled to almost nothing. It was a tiny fraction of the amount of people that were still doing M+ compared to what the amount of people that were once doing it back in the Legion expansion or even Battle for Azeroth, right? By increasing the difficulty of the content and then making it less rewarding, or even just not changing the rewards, a lot less people felt like it was worth their time, a lot less people felt like they wanted to engage in the content, and that led to people also then not just quitting the Mythic Plus community, but also unsubscribing from WoW, and WoW is now faced with the problem where it has, I believe, and I'm told, we don't have confirmation, but a record low amount of subs, you know, following the launch of a new patch. So anyway, that's a video. I just want to reiterate by saying your opinions aren't invalid whether you agree or disagree with me. I'm not trying to say that certain people are wrong for feeling a certain way, or that, you know, you're not allowed to welcome these changes. I know personally I'm going to have more fun with a more difficult path of exile. That's not what I'm talking about. It's just the fact that I think that these changes overall are not good when you keep in mind the totality of the PoE player base. And I really do hope they rethink the direction they want to take PoE in going into 9.16 and future, in 3.16 and future patches, because there are ways to solve the problems they want to solve in terms of the disparity between different builds and the difficulty of the content, but I don't think the ways they are trying to solve those problems is ideal at the moment. So anyway, I'll catch you guys in the next one.